Hi, my name is Arild Næss. I'm Associate Professor at NTNU, and this is my presentation of our paper, Assessing the Quality of Human-Generated Summaries with Weakly Supervised Learning. This is joint work with Joachim Olsen, who wrote his master thesis on this topic under my supervision, and Pierre Lisson, who is a senior research scientist at the Norwegian Computing Center, NR. Most previous work on summary evaluation focuses on automatic summarization. So why do we want to automatically measure the quality of summaries written by humans? The motivation for this work came from a startup company called Vendu that focuses on facilitating real estate transactions or property sales, mostly of houses and apartments. Now, in such a transaction, the real estate condition report is a crucial document. This is a long and technical report presenting the current condition of the property for sale. And we have reason to believe that less than half of the buyers actually read the full reports. So it's fair to assume that a large part of the other half read only the summary. But most people in the real estate business seem to agree that a lot of these summaries don't do a very good job of summarizing. These are two actual unabridged examples of real estate report summaries. And you don't really have to read Norwegian to be able to see the difference in quality between them. The first summary on the left is quite thorough and appears to include a lot of the key information from the report. Whereas the second summary is very brief and doesn't give a very clear impression of the condition of this house at all. Fully 10% of real estate transactions in Norway end in conflict. There is a good chance that some of these conflicts arise from the buyer being surprised by aspects of the property that were described in the condition report, but not in the summary. Therefore, Vendu was interested in automatically evaluating the quality of these summaries to give them a clear idea of how big this problem is and to be able to flag those summaries that need to be improved. And summaries of varying quality are of course in no way unique to real estate condition reports, so the work we present here can have many other applications as well. There exists a substantial body of work on summary evaluation, but it has, as mentioned, focused largely on automatically generated summaries. We can divide this work into three groups. Some work uses human judges who rate the summaries according to a number of criteria. But by far the most common form of summary evaluation relies on measuring the overlap with a reference summary, which is of course written by a human. The Rouge metric is a particularly popular variant. There is some work on summary evaluation that does not rely on reference summaries. These typically use some form of a divergence measure between the source document and the generated summary. But the automated evaluation of human-generated summaries has received little attention so far. And since our summaries are written by humans, we don't need to worry so much about readability or redundancy, and we can focus on how well the summary covers the content of the source document. Inspired by previous work on document similarity, we embed the report and summary as vectors in a shared semantic space, using the cosine of the vectors as a proxy for summary quality. We use weak supervision to annotate the summaries as good or bad. We use the resulting labels for evaluation, but also to train a neural network that transforms the embeddings of the reports and summaries. The resulting embedding, which we call the summary content space, should contain only key parts of the full semantic content, particularly of the reports, so that the cosine of the vectors in this space will actually be a good proxy for the quality of the summary. Our data set is a corpus of almost 100,000 Norwegian real estate condition reports and their corresponding summaries. The reports typically range from about 600 to about 2,000 words, while the summaries can often be as short as 40 words and are usually well below 350 words. In our weak supervision setup, the idea is that instead of annotating the dataset manually, we get domain experts to create a set of heuristic rules for what makes a good summary. These are the 22 heuristic rules our domain experts came up with. Those that are marked with a red minus sign are indications of a bad summary, while those that are marked with a green plus sign are indications of a good summary. These rules are what we call our labeling functions. And these can often be in disagreement with one another, so that we have, for the same summary, some indications that it is good and some indications that it is bad. We aggregate the results of all of these labeling functions with a generative model using the Snorkel framework, which gives us estimated probabilities of whether each summary is a good summary. We see here a histogram of the resulting probabilistic labels for our dataset. Now, these probabilistic labels are expected to be noisy, which is why this is called weak supervision. We can't quite trust the labels. Therefore, it is important when we use these labels to train a model that the training be noise aware. Ideally, the resulting trained model will be better than the labels it has been trained on. Our baseline model architecture looks like this. We have our report, denoted R, and the corresponding summary, denoted S. The blue box here, age, is a mapping of R and S to vectors ZR and ZS. First we do basic pre-processing of the text, then we embed the documents into a vector space, using either latent semantic analysis or doc2vec as our embedding. And the cosine of the angle between these vectors gives us our quality measure Q. The thinking being that a good summary should be similar to the report it summarizes, and therefore be represented by a vector with a similar direction. The smaller the angle, the bigger the cosine, the better the summary. How well does this work? Well, we can compare the results to our weak supervision labels. We input our reports and summaries into our weak supervision model, which gives us probabilistic labels. And by thresholding these labels, as well as our quality measures Q, we can compute accuracy and F1 scores. And we see that these numbers are decent for doc2vec and quite good for LSA. There is an important caveat here, which is that these labels are of course not a ground truth, but merely a kind of educated guess as to which summaries are good and which are bad. So all of our results remain somewhat tentative. They are not entirely accurate measures of accuracy in F1, so to speak. Now, this is just a baseline. There's no learning here. So let's try to learn a better mapping of R and S to Z and R. Of R and S to ZR and ZS. And we do this by training a neural model here. First, let's consider using a feed-forward neural network that takes the LSA or doc2vec embeddings of R and S as inputs. Now, we train this neural network by using a noise-aware variation of the cosine embedding loss function here, so that the resulting mapping tries to minimize the distance between a report and its summary, if the weak supervision model considers the summary to be good, and to maximize that distance if the weak supervision model considers the summary to be bad. The resulting vector space is what we call the summary content space. These are the results for the feed-forward neural network models, and we see a substantial improvement upon the unsupervised baselines. And interestingly, doc2vec does better than LSA when used in conjunction with the feed-forward neural networks, unlike what is the case when doc2vec and LSA are used as standalone baselines. We tried several variations of neural networks in this component here. LSTM models didn't work so well, but we had more luck with CNNs, convolutional neural networks. Here the inputs were embeddings of single words. Using word2vec gave the best results. And the improvement over the feed-forward networks is not huge. We also see that the feed-forward models actually achieve lower loss, but in terms of both accuracy and F1 score, the CNN model does better. Here we see the distributions of quality measures for the samples where the weak supervision model is confident about a label. Shown in red here are the summaries that the label model is confident that are bad, and shown in green we see the summaries that the label model is confident that are good. For the LSA model, for the LSA baseline above, we see that we have a decent separation, but a large degree of overlap, whereas for the CNN model below, we see a much better separation. Above now, we see what the CNN model's quality measures look like for the entire dataset. We get a little more density in the middle here naturally, but we still get a nice bimodal shape to this distribution, separating clearly between good and bad summaries, while still spreading the quality measures out over a large part of the domain, which is also desirable, since the quality of the summaries is a question of degree and not an either-or question. And returning to the two examples I showed you earlier, here are weak supervision labels for the two, as well as the quality measures from the CNN model. These examples are from the test set, so the CNN model has not seen the labels. We see that the weak supervision labels, 0.92 and 0, are close to the maximum and at the minimum, respectively. So the label model is very confident that the first summary is good and the second one is bad. Whereas the quality measure for the good summary, at 0.23, is not among the highest, but it is close to the right-hand peak of the distribution. So this would mean that the CNN model considers this to be a typically good summary, one could say. The quality measure for the bad summary is close to the minimum, which means that the CNN model, like the label model, is very confident that this is a bad summary. So the label model and the CNN model agree for both of these summaries. That's not always the case. And that is a hope, right? That the trained model, by becoming more reliable than the weak supervision labels it is trained on, sometimes will disagree with the labeling. We have seen some instances where this seems to be the case. We include an example in the paper. But without having an annotation of the dataset, we cannot verify whether this in fact happens regularly. So what have we done? We have demonstrated how we can generate labels indicating summary quality using weak supervision. We have used these labels to train an embedding to a summary content space, where only the key parts of the semantic content should be represented. And we have evaluated our approach on a large corpus of Norwegian real estate condition reports and their associated summaries. Our best results gave a substantial improvement over the baseline, indicating that our summary content space does indeed manage to represent the relevant content of the reports and summaries better than a generic semantic space does. But our results are evaluated only on the somewhat unreliable weak supervision labels, so they remain tentative. Our hypothesis is that our results correlate well with human judgments, and we are currently working on getting real estate agents to annotate a portion of our corpus for evaluation so that we can, hopefully, validate this hypothesis. Now, if we can trust our models, about a third of the summaries in our corpus are of decidedly poor quality. And if that is anywhere close to being the case, then the automatic evaluation of summaries written by humans would seem to be a very worthwhile endeavor. Thank you so much for your attention.